Lời đầu tiên xin chào các độc giả đã đến với website rèn luyện kỹ năng.com. Khi tìm đến với website rèn luyện kỹ năng, chắc hẳn bạn đang mong muốn tìm cho mình một công cụ tốt nhất trong quá trình rèn luyện kỹ năng. Kỹ năng ở đây có thể là kỹ năng lãnh đạo, kỹ năng bán hàng, kỹ năng mềm, kỹ năng sống và rất nhiều các kỹ năng khác. Thông thường khi nghĩ đến việc rèn luyện các kỹ năng như chúng tôi đã đề cập ở trên, chúng ta thường hay nghĩ đến việc tìm mua cái đầu sách hoặc tham gia các chương trình hội thảo. Nhưng trong cuộc sống bận rộn của thế kỷ 21, thời gian và tiền bạc là hai thứ luôn bị giới hạn nhiều nhất. Với sự ra đời của website rèn luyện kỹ năng.com, chúng tôi mang đến cho bạn một công cụ tốt hơn trong việc rèn luyện kỹ năng của mình, đó chính là các DVD rèn luyện kỹ năng. Bạn sẽ không còn phải tốn quá nhiều thời gian để đọc sách hay tốn quá nhiều tài chính để tham gia các chương trình hội thảo. Chỉ cần bỏ DVD vào đầu máy, ngay lập tức bạn đã có thể tận hưởng những thước phim quý giá được chia sẻ từ các diễn giả nổi tiếng tại Việt Nam và trên thế giới. Website rèn luyện kỹ năng.com cung cấp đầy đủ cho bạn các DVD rèn luyện kỹ năng trên nhiều lĩnh vực. Tất cả các DVD rèn luyện kỹ năng của các diễn giả nước ngoài có tại website rèn luyện kỹ năng.com đều có phụ đề 100% hỗ trợ tối đa cho quý độc giả khi theo dõi. Rèn luyện kỹ năng.com cam kết chất lượng tất cả các DVD khi cung cấp cho quý khách hàng. Với hân hạnh được phục vụ cho rất nhiều các khách hàng trên cả nước. Chỉ cần click đặt hàng, trong vòng 1 đến 3 ngày, bạn đã có thể cầm sản phẩm trong tay. Rèn luyện kỹ năng hân hạnh được phục vụ quý khách.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. Wow, thank you. Thank you for your warm welcome. What a crowd, what a turnout tonight. You know, recently I was introduced on the stage in New York as the man who'd made $100 million in real estate in Australia. And I got up on stage and I also said, thank you very much. It was very humbling. But I added, I feel I ought to set the record straight. Firstly, when you're in New York, it may seem as though Australia and New Zealand are connected by the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but they're really separate countries. It wasn't Australia, it was down in New Zealand. And secondly, if the truth be known, it wasn't in real estate, it was actually in the oil industry. And thirdly, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't 100 million, it was only 10 million. And anyway, it wasn't me, it was my brother. And he didn't make 10 million, he lost 10 million. But apart from that, you've got the right person. You see, the whole point is things are never what they seem. We think we know the way something works or the way it's put together, but very often we are flat wrong. My belief is that real estate is not just a little bit better than other investments or even a lot better than other investments. It's hundreds and thousands of times better. But to convince you of that, you're going to have to change some of your paradigms. Remember what I said, things are never what they seem. One of my favorite statements goes like this. I know it's a bit provocative, but and there it is. Woman without her man is helpless. And I put that up there for a specific reason. The point is that things are never what they seem. If I ask you, what do McDonald's do? You all know that they make hamburgers, right? And it's true, they do make hamburgers. But making hamburgers is incidental to McDonald's operations. What McDonald's do is very clever. They go around the world and always buy up pieces of land on the left-hand side of the road leaving town for those countries that drive on the left, and on the right-hand side of the road leaving town for those countries that drive on the right. The reason why they do that is when you're driving home from work after a hard day at the office and you suddenly remember you haven't bought any groceries, what on earth are you going to do for dinner? You can see the McDonald's sign and say, oh, I'll just pull off the road and buy takeaways rather than having to cross the peak hour traffic. So they buy pieces of land on that side of the road, they pull down whatever's there, they put up a fancy glass structure, slap the big yellow M on it, and then they do three very clever things. Firstly, it's true that they sign up their franchisees for a high upfront fee. That's smart on McDonald's part. And secondly, it's true they have a contract such that every hamburger sold results in a commission coming back to McDonald's. Also very smart. But thirdly, and most importantly, McDonald's signs its tenants up on long-term leases. McDonald's owns just about every property that they operate out of. McDonald's is the world's biggest and swishest real estate company. You've all had a chance to read this. Could I have a show of hands, please? How many of you agree with the statement? And you're brave enough to admit it. All right, well, you came without your spouse, and you arrived on your own. All right, thank you. How many of you disagree with it? Oh, folks, we've got a turnout that is hopeless. We've got to backtrack here for a moment. What is the opposite of love? Hate, you all say. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. It's where you're indifferent about something. The worst thing you can ever be called is a nice person. because the word nice is an acronym for nothing inside me cares enough about you to have an opinion. You're nice. I'm telling you, if you want to be successful as a real estate investor or as anything else, you can't be indifferent. You've got to have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, how will you make a decision? If you don't have an opinion as to whether it's a good deal, you'll never buy it. You're allowed to have an opinion. Doesn't matter if your opinion clashes with that of the person sitting next to you. Have an opinion. Be willing to make mistakes. The people who never make mistakes never learn. Those who make mistakes often learn very fast. So having said all of that, could I please have a show of hands? How many agree with this statement? Woman without a man is helpless. Thank you. That's quite a good turnout. And now, how many disagree with it? All right, thank you. That's most of you. Well, that's very interesting to see. What I want to do now is take this pen again and just put a couple of marks on this paper. I'm going to put a comma down here. And I'm going to put a colon here, actually. And how about a comma here? Those of you who don't get it yet, ask someone discreetly in the break. Can you see how by adding 3 little marks to this piece of paper, we have completely changed the meaning of it? How many of you now agree with this statement? Oh, look at that. Have I redeemed myself, madam? Thank you. And how many now disagree with it? Oh, some of you. Okay, interesting. The point I'm making here is we had a statement about which most of you had an opinion, and then by putting 3 little dots on the paper, we suddenly completely changed the meaning of that sentence. And life can be like that. Things are never what they seem. Sometimes by changing a little aspect, your paradigms are shifted. And what I want to do tonight is show you by adding 3 metaphorical little dots to your perception about real estate, suddenly we might change it from being a lousy investment to being, wow, I never realized it was that good. That's pretty hot. Who would like to go on that journey? Okay, let's do it. I came from a family that prized education. Their belief system was to do well in life, you need to study hard. Because by studying hard, you can get qualifications and a degree. And with a degree, you can get a good job. And with a good job, you can build a career. And with a career, you can have financial security. Was that bad advice on the part of my parents? Well, it wasn't for them, right? They did to the best of their abilities. They tried to give us the tools we needed. It's the sort of education that they would have wanted to have. So from their perspective, it was great advice. So it was without much thinking that I went off to university. Didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't like the sight of blood, still don't really. That was medicine out. The thought of peering into people's mouths all day, I mean, yuck. That's dentistry out. I wanted to do law, but then you have to practice in the country in which you study, so I eliminated that. I went through this process of elimination and ended up doing engineering. However, during my first week at engineering school, I looked around me at these academics who were supposed to have made it. And they wore shabby clothes and drove around in old clunkers and lived in very modest homes. And I thought there's something wrong with my picture that academics have financial security. So I took it upon myself at the tender age of 17 to make a study of the rich. I wanted to know what is it that the rich have in common. Because I thought if I could identify 30 or 40 things that they have in common, and if furthermore I could emulate those things, then my chances of becoming fabulously wealthy surely would go up. Would you agree? Good theory. It didn't work though. Because at the end of this 9-month study, I concluded that the rich had very little in common. It wasn't age or gender or whether you were born into a rich family or not, or whether you're an immigrant family, whether you're the firstborn, the lastborn. It had nothing to do with any of those things. I could only find 2 things that the rich had in common. The first is that almost without exception, the rich had integrity. In other words, their word was their honor. If they said they were going to do something, they did it. Now here's a secret I learned about integrity long after my 9-month study at the age of 17. Integrity is not genetic. Do you hear what I'm saying? If you don't like the level of integrity that you've got, you can change it in a heartbeat. Just make the commitment to be more true to your word. And I'm telling you, your financial future will change. The second thing that the rich had in common, almost without exception, is that they either made their money or they held their wealth in property. In other words, the Hughes Corporation, they made their money because they had a patent on a diamond-tipped drilling bit. That's how they made their billions of dollars. But they didn't just hold it in stocks of diamond-tipped drilling bits. They bought real estate with it. So the rich either made their money or held their wealth in real estate. That's why I decided at 17, that's what I want to get into. Now, it wasn't easy as a 17-year-old kid going to a bank and asking for a mortgage. If you think I look young now, you should have seen me then. They thought I was 12. The first bank manager thought it was a prank. If you think that's tough, imagine what it was like for me as a 17-year-old kid asking a 17-year-old girl out on a date, and she too would think I was 12. Now, you may well laugh. I got to date the 17-year-olds for years afterwards. Just kidding. But anyway, it was tough getting my first mortgage. But I succeeded. I got my first property. And then as time went on, I bought more and more properties. It took 4 years to get an honors bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, not the easiest course around. They came to me and said, you know, it's only 1 more year for a master's. Why don't you do it? And I couldn't think of an answer. So I did it. And then I switched to PhD, and I ended up spending 8 years at university. They say there are 3 kinds of students: part-time, full-time, and eternal. I was the eternal variety. But at the end of those 8 years, I popped out with a little piece of paper that said PhD. Now think of my parents. Remember the ones with the philosophy that you have to study hard to do well. Do you think they were proud of their son? Oh, can you imagine? They were sitting by the telephone waiting for me to phone them to announce the acceptance of a job. And I had a couple of interviews. I remember going to one interview where they seemed impressed. They said, well, we want to take you on. We'll offer you a salary of $32,000. Now, before you scoff at that, back then, $32,000 was a handsome salary. And it would have been tempting. However, unfortunately for my prospective employer, I'd just completed a real estate deal that netted me $35,000. And I remember thinking to myself, why would anyone in their right mind work for 40 hours a week for 50 weeks of the year, turning up every morning at 8 or 9 o'clock saying, hi boss, here I am, what would you like me to do today, for $32,000 lousy when in 1 week you can make 35 and take the rest of the year off? So I never accepted that job, and to this day I have never had a job. You see, we're stuck in this trap thinking that we need to do what's not successful for us because there's no alternative. And I want to show you that there is an alternative. I was cajoled